Welcome to Resisting Beta, the men's health podcast. And now, your host, Andrew Bontz.
Welcome to another episode of the Resisting Beta podcast. I am by myself doing a solo episode this week because of some of the feedback we received from our last solo cast. And today, I want to talk about a formula that I documented as I look back post-divorce on the magnetic man formula and share a little bit of tips and stuff that I applied to my life when I decided to get back in the dating world when I was finished with my divorce or ready to date, or at least to try it out, I guess, at the time, because I don't think that anyone's ever, if you're asking yourself the question is like, am I ready to date? The only way to figure that out is in my opinion, to try. Just test it out and see where it goes. So I remember when I first started rocking in the dating world, I love to seek out solutions and research and that kind of stuff and get people's opinions so I can maybe get some shortcuts and stuff like that. And I remember seeing a dating coach in a Facebook group that I had joined, and he had a comment saying, like, I can help you sleep with as many women as you want. And we had a conversation. I let him continue his pitch, but when he started out of the gate, he lost me. I mean, I didn't want that. In fact, it runs counter to kind of who I want to be and who I am as a man. And if that's you, I mean, I completely understand it. I was there in my 20s, like, driven by that and having that be your number one thing, and that's fine. And if that is, then be transparent about it. But for me, it wasn't really what I wanted. So, and honestly, it sounds exhausting to deal with that lifestyle that would have to come with that as a dad of 3 girls. So as I look back, here are some of the key points that I would give myself in the first year after divorce. As first year divorce, getting back into dating, right? So, number 1, an abundance mentality is crucial. So, I wrote a blog post, and I'm going to cite that a little bit as I talk through this. So, I remember reading a book, Robert Glover's book and Rollo Tomasi's books that talked about one of Rollo Tomasi's books, The Rational Male, and Dr. Robert Glover, I've talked about a little bit, is No More Mr. Nice Guy, and he's got a dating book. And in both of those books, they share this topic about how men are the prize. And specifically, they talk about how men in your mid to late 30s, you have, they called it sexual market value, or becoming a high value man. And if you've played around in this dating space at all, you've probably heard one or two of those topics. And at the time, for me, it's what I wanted to hear. Like, I was in my late 30s, not an abundance mindset, and hearing that and seeing statistics and data and all sort of things that kind of back that up, it made me feel good. It made me feel like, hey, I actually have a shot at this. But as I think about it now, I don't really necessarily agree with it. At least the positioning and the messaging. I can see how it's sexy and it sells, but here's my view on it, right? Because I do like it because it's celebrating your self-worth, and for someone who didn't really do a very good job about putting himself first and had a really low self-worth, especially coming out of the divorce. But just because you're a man doesn't mean you're the prize. In fact, just calling it a prize positions it incorrectly, because that means that there's a winning and losing in a relationship. And I don't feel like that is a cornerstone of a relationship that's going to be successful, because that means that the woman would be the loser here. If you're the prize, I guess technically she would be winning, but if you're the prize, but I just don't like how it positions it, right? So, because it just doesn't seem authentic to me. So, and that kind of goes to my other point of, as you're looking at dating, so it's being authentic and showing your goofy side. Because I remember when I first got into dating, I use the dating apps primarily because I'm an introvert and going out to bars and that kind of stuff. Not super interesting. And to be honest, I was still to this day probably to cold approach a woman in public that I'm attracted to still scares me. If I had to do that, I'm in a relationship now, so I thankfully don't have to deal with that. But it's something that I struggled with. But the dating apps for me were a good fit. So being authentic and goofy on those apps was something that I had to try out. So I had to kind of practice a bit. So I remember one of the best things I ever did on the dating apps was I recorded well, first it was a TikTok video that went really, really well, where I did a boudoir, male gray sweatpants boudoir shoot, where I just wore gray sweatpants and I followed this tutorial from this boudoir photographer, and I did a video of myself, and I was laughing and kind of making fun of myself with my facial expressions and stuff and giggling as I went about it. But I put it out on my dating profile, and it was by far the best thing that I ever did. It got a lot of response of just me being kind of goofy and a little bit inappropriate, but just laughing at myself, which showed my authenticity and showed that I don't take myself too seriously, and I can have a little bit of fun. So that would be a key point that I would encourage you to do if you are in the dating scene, to just be authentic and be yourself and practice being goofy. And now it gets to kind of my next point is having that practice in process mentality. So practice living outside your comfort zone. That was one thing that, as I was reading these books, growing up, I didn't really have a ton of dates and didn't have a ton of girlfriends and that kind of stuff in high school and college. And I would always look at the men that did and think that they just had it all figured out. And one of the things that I kind of realized from my athlete side of me is that they just practiced more. On a daily basis, they're practicing talking to beautiful women. They're just doing it over and over and over and over again. And that is why they look like they're better at it than me, which makes complete sense to me. To where any other thing, if you practice it enough, you get better at it. And if you don't practice it because of fear, you're not going to get good at it. So having that practice mindset and realizing that it truly is just a numbers game. And if you don't let the numbers play in your favor, most likely you're going to have to settle for something than what you want. And that's like the scarcity mindset compared to the abundance mindset. So just practice living outside your comfort zone. And some of the things in the dating world was having that first kiss and saying things that might be a little bit inappropriate or edgy and that kind of stuff. Trying things out from dating experts. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I Googled funny pickup lines and tried them out and then just see if they worked. And if I went through the dating apps and I went through everybody, I'd delete the app and start a new account and try all over again. and really just kind of having that process mindset of like, hey, I just honestly just want to meet good people and see where it goes. And I'll show people who I am and put my best foot forward. And if it's not a good fit, that's fine. I'll find somebody else, and that's okay. So another thing that I believe can help you be a magnetic man is to have rules for yourself, to protect yourself from yourself, especially in the dating world. So what do I mean by that? So I gave a rule to myself is I would never have more than 2 drinks on a date. And I found this out, necessarily the hard way, but if I would have more than 2 drinks, I wouldn't be as sharp. I would give in to more urges at that point in time. So I'd probably get physical sooner than I should in a relationship. And another rule I had was no sex before the 3rd date, because it allowed me to connect and see if I can connect that isn't physical. Because where I made the mistake is I would get physical too soon. And if the sex was great, it would put me in a position where even if there was some things that some red flags that I, probably wouldn't have gone on another date with this woman if the sex wasn't so good. It put myself in a where then I'm having to justify like, oh, well, the sex was great or the physical intimacy was great. But, these other things are not really what I'm looking for. So, and if that's the premise of the relationship and that's what it is, then that's okay. And you're just being authentic and communicating that, hey, this is what this is and this is what it isn't. And if they're okay with that, that's fine. If not, then that's okay. And that kind of goes to another tip that I got was being a good ender and really practicing being a good ender. What do I mean by that? So basically ending relationships as soon as it presents itself that you should. So on a first date or a second date where if you hit a red flag or you hit a moment that you've uncovered what you don't want or not something that you're not looking for in a woman, or counter to values or whatnot, allowing yourself to end that relationship before it goes further. So like right after the first date. In fact, shortly thereafter, if I didn't feel like it was going to go anywhere, I'd send a text message or I'd make a phone call, or depending on what I felt like that day. And if I go on 3 or 4 dates and start getting a little bit more serious, then if it just wasn't going to work, I'd end it, right? So it was very uncomfortable for me being a people pleaser because I didn't want to hurt their feelings. So, but however, I did not want that to be the reason why I just let the relationship kind of mosey on, because I didn't have the courage to break up with them or tell them that, hey, this isn't going to be a good fit. And I see a lot of people in the dating world where they just ghost people. They just stop talking to them and have them go away, which I pride myself on not being that kind of man. Like, I want to have those or practice having those conversations that they don't want to hear and I don't want to do them. But it's important to have those conversations versus just like hoping it dies on the vine and hoping they go away, hoping the other person goes away just by, assuming, catching all these signals that, I'll just ignore them and they'll be fine. Or you just stop talking to them altogether and ignore all their phone calls, which is, in my opinion, being a coward, which is counter to being a man. So another tip I'd give you, plan dates you enjoy. So do stuff that you like to do and have them be along with you. So for me, that was, I would be doing things that are active and going places that I want to go anyway, and plan that accordingly. So pretty simple tip, but it helped me lead and be who I wanted to be and do stuff I want to do anyway. So a lot of times it wasn't drinks and it wasn't dinner, especially on the first date and that kind of stuff, like just being a little bit more conscious because, for a first date, a lot of times I was dropping $300 or $400 in a couple of weeks on women that, I shouldn't even have interest to. And I think that goes to, another one of the rules that I had that I didn't mention before was I required a phone call or a Zoom chat before we go on a first date, because I'm not going to invest my time or money into, a woman that, just from seeing her dating profile, because, pictures are pretty easy to position, where if it's physically, I'm not going to be attracted to this person, or mentally, if having a conversation with her is like talking to an old shoe, or I have to like draw it out of her to have this conversation on a date or on a phone call or Zoom chat, then it's probably not going to be a great date. So just a few things on just planning a structure to, one, optimize my time and figure out, creating a very strong filter. So that kind of leads me to the next tip of one thing that I think was one of the best things that I did early on in the dating process was I first wrote down what I learned from my marriage about what I don't want in a relationship. And I also wrote out who my ideal woman was. And I wrote it down in a Google Doc and just left it there. And it's pretty interesting. I look back at it. I just looked at it a couple weeks ago. And I'll kind of read some of the notes that I had. So if you don't define who you're trying to attract very specifically, you're not going to attract her. But one of the second steps that I think Darren Hardy had recommended, not necessarily a dating world, but he had shared his story where how he wrote down his ideal wife, and then he had the second step of, I need to become the man to attract her. So write down your ideal partner and then ask yourself the question, am I doing the things right now that's going to attract this woman? If the answer is no, then start doing stuff that is going to attract her and put yourself in positions that you would meet women like her. So here are just a few things that I wrote down that I was interested in. Is I wanted a woman that was comfortable in her feminine nature. So comfortable being, cooking and crass and having kind of a mothering mindset or just energy about her, and comfortable doing the more traditional, roles of a relationship where I will handle a lot of the stuff that is traditional stuff that men will do, and she's okay doing the other things just because that's what she's comfortable doing, and allowing us both to kind of live in that relationship polarity. And it's probably a little bit old fashioned in today's dynamic, but it's what I want, and that's okay. So other things that I wrote down was dynamic, funny, good listener, strives to be the best version of herself in fitness, faith, and mental fitness. So reading, meditation, yoga, that kind of stuff. And it helped give me a filter of when I was dating and looking at profiles and that kind of stuff, where I wasn't only judging off of looks. It was, what are these other parts of the picture that she can bring in? And there's some values there. I mean, values first is very, very important. Some of the political stuff became more important depending on how political the other person is. And just having that clear picture, right? So another thing that I focused on was just having a holistic mindset. Being a man who understands the difference between his masculine energy and what it means to be a man, right? So trying to seek out how to learn how to be a man myself, and what the hell does that mean to me as an individual. And to me, I had listened to a podcast, and he had said that a man is someone who can harness his power, but leads with empathy and kindness. Someone that has, I know that Jordan Peterson talks a lot about, where a man who could be violent, knows he can be violent, but has the power and the mental aptitude to not, but he's there. That beast is inside, and you can tap into him if the shit hit the fan, but having the ability to put that aside unless necessary, right? So these are just a few of the tips that I followed. I believe that is my foundation on how I became a magnetic man that really attracted some beautiful, smart, and wonderful women into my life when I was dating, and now in the current relationship that I had. And I really don't think I would have gotten to this place if I didn't have the rules that I have, if I didn't put my values first and really learn my values. Because I think as you get, and when you're younger, in your 20s, in your teens, you kind of borrow your values from your parents. But in my 30s, I really kind of started to just figure it out, my own values, what's important to me, and why is that important, and really defining those and writing those down. So yeah, that was what I followed to become a more magnetic man, and position myself, show my kind heart, show my creativity, my authenticity to women, and well, I think it would apply to male friendships too, to help become a better version of myself. So I hope that was helpful, and I hope you are making the progress towards becoming a more magnetic man in your life, no matter if you're single or married. I think that consistently seeking to become more attractive to your partner or future partner, or even, honestly, if you're looking for male friends. I think these are all things that can apply. So, homework. My homework for you is to write out something that scares you and be bold and to practice that thing. Have a practice mindset. And if you're in the dating world, practice doing something that makes you uncomfortable for the next 7 days, whatever that is. And I think you've got a lot of benefit from that. So thank you so much for being here, men. I really appreciate you, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Resisting Beta podcast. Here's where I need your help. I'd love for you to give us a review on your favorite podcast player. Also, follow us on TikTok and Instagram and share this message out to a man that needs to hear it, because that's how we impact this world. Thank you very much. Make it a great day, men.